Welcome to Computer Says Maybe Live. It's lovely to have you all here.
We can keep saying the party system is rubbish and it needs to change. Yes, it's true. But if we want to be winning the progressive arguments on our policies, we need to translate not just to media journalists and brief them, not just to citizens, which is important, we need to bring them along, but also to local councils, to the mayors, to devolved governments, that we have forgotten those bedrocks of democracy. And if we forget those on this side of history, the bad guys, the naughty ones, haven't. They are going to keep saying, we've got a need for you, we've got a need for you. We also have the need, and we also, I think, need to be thinking long-term, generational and big.
There's no getting around the fact that these business models are fundamentally wound up with A, surveillance, and B, spreading vitriolic content and then having you engage with that content so that you can keep generating profits. And if you don't have that model at the core of it, well, then there is no profit for Facebook. There is no Facebook. It all becomes a public good. And so the conversation in part that I wonder whether we should be having is whether social media companies should exist to begin with, and whether they should be public goods, whether they should be public infrastructure.
The right to object says, you cannot use my data to target me for direct marketing purposes. Now, direct marketing is everything that goes on with personalized advertising. It's an absolute right to object, which means the company can't say, oh, but you signed a contract, oh, but you consented, oh, but we have a legitimate interest, which are the other legal bases that they may argue. You just can say, doesn't matter, I object. So there's a sort of beauty to it. We kind of sort of saw it as almost like the Achilles heel of this whole crazy surveillance apparatus. So I took them to court. Facebook obviously disagreed, argued that it didn't apply to them. In fact, GDPR didn't apply at all to what they were doing. I mean, that was the best argument that they made. That personalized advertising is not direct marketing, et cetera, et cetera. They continued to argue that even after the Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO, the data protection regulator in the UK, did intervene in the case, finding exactly, basically making all of the same arguments my legal team made, which was amazing because we didn't have huge hope that the ICO was going to take a kind of progressive position, but it really did. And I think that, I have to be careful how I say this, Facebook, I think, pretty much Meta understood that, they were not probably going to win in court, and it went down to the eve of the trial, where they basically finally agreed to do what I'd been asking for 3.5 years, which is to turn off surveillance advertising, basically, for me. Which was a massive victory, because it's the first time that's, I think, ever happened globally, that they've agreed to turn off surveillance advertising for a non-paying user.
It isn't a siloed issue. Big tech impacts like literally every part of our everyday life, whether it's in interacting with an NHS system, using social media, paying a bill, and so I think naturally the spaces are colliding a bit more, it feels like to me. I think that particularly in the context of public sector algorithms, I think, there's lots of sort of groups that historically haven't thought about technology at all, who are now completely impacted. For example, disability rights groups who are, for a long time have been struggling with benefit systems that are unfair. And actually, now that the intersection of technology with that, I think has really, opened the space, both spaces, and required us to work more closely together. I also think things like People versus Big Tech has been very good at that in terms of creating a really wide coalition of groups who are working on lots of different issues that intersect in some way.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. This was lovely, and we will continue hanging out very soon.